Agamemnon, the mighty king and conqueror of Troy, returned to his homeland expecting glory, honor, and the adoration of his people. After years of brutal war, he believed his triumph would be celebrated with feasts and songs echoing through the halls of Mycenae. But instead of joyous celebration, he found only silence and unease. The palace that once bustled with life now felt cold and distant, its people wary and withdrawn. Within these shadowed corridors, betrayal was already taking root. Agamemnon's return stirred old resentments and awakened dangerous ambitions among those closest to him. The man who had defeated Troy would soon fall, not to a foreign enemy, but to the one he trusted most, his own wife, Clytemnestra, whose heart burned with anger and vengeance. This is a story woven with pride, sacrifice, and a curse that haunted the house of Atreus for generations. Each member of this royal family carried the weight of ancient sins. Agamemnon believed he could control his fate, but every choice he made set in motion a relentless chain of revenge and sorrow, like dominoes falling one after another. In his quest for victory, he broke sacred bonds and made sacrifices that could never be undone. The gods and his own family would not forget these transgressions. The house of Atreus was cursed, each generation doomed to repeat cycles of violence and tragedy, as if fate itself demanded payment for their ancestors' crimes. Agamemnon's greatest battle was not fought on the plains of Troy, but within the very walls of his own home, where trust had withered and danger lurked in every shadow. The past never truly disappears. It lingers in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike, sometimes with a knife in hand, sometimes with a whispered word. Agamemnon's homecoming would become a warning for all who follow. Even kings cannot escape the debts and shadows of their past, no matter how far they travel or how many victories they claim. Sometimes a hero's welcome is not a promise of peace, but the first step toward a tragic end, a reminder that glory and doom often walk hand in hand. For 10 years Troy resisted the might of Greece. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, led the Greeks, united them, endured their quarrels, and kept the war alive. The war was about more than Helen, it was about honor and power. Heroes fell, alliances broke, but Agamemnon pressed on. The Greeks finally triumphed, not by force but by cunning, the Trojan horse. Troy burned, its treasures seized, its people scattered. Agamemnon returned home with Cassandra, a Trojan princess, as his prize. He believed his struggles were over, that peace and glory awaited. But the greatest threat was not on the battlefield. It waited in the quiet halls of Mycenae, where old wounds festered. Agamemnon's victory would become his undoing. The war's end was only the beginning of a darker conflict. He was a legend abroad, but a marked man at home. The seeds of his downfall had already been sown. The true battle was about to begin. Before the Greeks could sail to Troy, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The greatest army ever assembled waited on the shores, their eyes fixed on the horizon, longing for the winds to carry them to glory. But the winds refused to blow. The sea remained eerily still, as if the gods themselves had pressed pause on fate. The army waited, restless, at Aulis, trapped by the will of the gods. Days turned to weeks, and hope began to fade, replaced by frustration and fear. Agamemnon, their leader, sought answers. He learned the price. Artemis demanded the life of his daughter Iphigenia as payment for the winds. Torn between love and duty, he faced an impossible choice. The fate of thousands rested on his decision, but so did the life of his beloved child. In the end, ambition won. Agamemnon tricked his wife, Clytemnestra, into sending Iphigenia, promising a wedding to the hero Achilles, a cruel deception masking a darker truth. Instead, Iphigenia was led to the altar as a sacrifice. The air was thick with sorrow and disbelief as the innocent girl was prepared for the gods. Some say Artemis took pity and spared her, whisking her away at the last moment. But all who watched saw a father willing to kill his child for the sake of war. The winds returned, and the fleet finally sailed for Troy, their hearts heavy with the memory of what had been lost. Agamemnon had paid for victory with blood. The stain of sacrifice would never wash away, haunting him even in triumph. But Clytemnestra's grief turned to hatred, a wound that would never heal. Her sorrow became a silent promise of vengeance. The sacrifice haunted the family, deepening the curse that already plagued their house. Shadows grew long in the halls of Agamemnon. Agamemnon's choice set the stage for his own destruction. As the gods watched and fate tightened its grip, the gods were appeased, but the cost was a mother's love and a family's peace. The echoes of that day would never fade. The war began, but the true tragedy was already unfolding at home, where love and trust had been shattered forever. In seeking glory, Agamemnon lost everything that mattered. His palace, once filled with laughter, now echoed with regret. The seeds of revenge were planted at Aulis, growing quietly in the hearts of those left behind. His wife would never forgive, nor forget. Her resolve hardened with every passing day. The curse grew stronger with every drop of innocent blood, binding the family to a fate they could not escape. The path to Troy was paved with betrayal, and the shadow of sacrifice would follow them into legend. The house of Atreus was cursed long before Agamemnon. His father, Atreus, committed unspeakable acts, serving his brother's children as a meal. The curse promised endless violence and betrayal. Agamemnon inherited this darkness, repeating the sins of his ancestors. Sacrificing Iphigenia fed the curse, drawing the gods' attention. Every choice was tainted by fate. The gods watched, ensuring the cycle of revenge continued. Blood demanded blood. Debts would be paid. Agamemnon's true enemy was not Troy, but the poison in his own bloodline. The curse was patient, waiting for its moment. Justice in the hands of the gods would be cruel and inescapable. While Agamemnon fought at Troy, Clytemnestra ruled Mycenae. Her grief for Iphigenia hardened into hatred. She would not forgive her husband's betrayal. Clytemnestra found an ally in Aegisthus, Agamemnon's cousin, whose family had also suffered at the hands of Atreus. Together, they became lovers and conspirators, united by vengeance. They ruled Mycenae, waiting for Agamemnon's return. The palace filled with whispers and fear. The people watched as power shifted, helpless to intervene. Clytemnestra and Aegisthus plotted carefully, ensuring the king would walk into a trap. The betrayal was rooted in old wounds and new alliances. The queen was no longer just a grieving mother, she was an executioner in waiting. The curse of the house of Atreus had found new hands. Revenge was no longer a secret, it was a plan. The stage was set for a bloody homecoming. The seeds of betrayal were ready to bloom. Aegisthus was more than a lover, he was vengeance incarnate. His presence in Mycenae challenged Agamemnon's legacy. While the king fought abroad, his enemy claimed his throne and his wife. Clytemnestra and Aegisthus ruled openly, daring anyone to oppose them. Their partnership was forged in grief and ambition. They filled the palace with loyalists and spies, awaiting news of Agamemnon's return. A direct confrontation was too risky, the king would be killed when most vulnerable. Aegisthus, descendant of Thyestes, was ready to complete the cycle of revenge. The violence that began with Atreus and Thyestes was about to come full circle. Clytemnestra and Aegisthus were instruments of fate, playing their parts in a tragedy written long ago. The final act awaited only the hero's return. The curse was alive in every shadow of the palace. The trap was set. The fall of Troy was signaled by a chain of fires. Agamemnon was coming home. The flames leapt from peak to peak, a message racing across the ancient world, carrying both hope and dread. For years the people of Mycenae had waited for their king's return, uncertain if he would ever walk their lands again. Mycenae prepared for celebration, but Clytemnestra and Aegisthus prepared for murder. The palace bustled with anticipation, yet in the shadows, whispered plans twisted the air with danger. Clytemnestra greeted the king with smiles and grand gestures, her eyes hiding secrets behind a mask of joy. She played the part of the loving wife, every movement calculated. She ordered a path of crimson tapestries, fit for a god, to welcome him. The rich red fabric stretched from his chariot to the palace, a symbol of honor, or perhaps a warning. Agamemnon hesitated, fearing the wrath of the gods for such pride. He knew that only the divine should tread on such luxury, and his heart pounded with unease. Clytemnestra coaxed him, flattering his ego and urging him to accept the honor. Her words dripped with honey, soothing his doubts and drawing him closer to her web. Worn down, Agamemnon stepped onto the crimson path. The crowd cheered, unaware of the true danger that awaited their king. Each step drew him deeper into her trap. The palace, once a place of safety, now loomed with silent menace. The celebration masked a deadly intent. Laughter and music filled the halls, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. The king, weary from war, was blind to the danger. His mind lingered on battles past, not the treachery that awaited him at home. The crimson path was a warning he failed to heed. Its color, deep as blood, foreshadowed the violence to come. Pride and trust led him to the palace doors. He believed in the loyalty of his household, never suspecting betrayal from within. The homecoming was a performance, the audience unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. The city rejoiced, blind to the storm gathering behind closed doors. Agamemnon walked toward his fate, the color of the tapestries foreshadowing the blood to come. Each step sealed his destiny. The hero's return would end in betrayal. The trust he placed in those closest to him would become his undoing. The final steps were taken in ignorance and doom. Agamemnon, once a mighty conqueror, now walked willingly into the jaws of fate, his story forever marked by the crimson path. Inside the palace, Agamemnon was treated as a god returned. Clytemnestra, ever the devoted wife, offered him a bath to wash away the war. He let down his guard, believing himself safe at home. As he relaxed, Clytemnestra struck. She trapped him in a net, rendering him helpless. Then, with cold resolve, she killed him. 3 blows for 3 debts. The king who conquered Troy died in his own bath, betrayed by the one he trusted most. His blood stained the water, echoing the crimson path he walked. Clytemnestra emerged, unashamed, declaring her act as justice for Iphigenia. Aegisthus claimed the throne, the curse seemingly fulfilled. The cycle of violence had come full circle, but peace was an illusion. The palace was soaked in blood and vengeance. Justice and revenge became indistinguishable. The house of Atreus was not free, the curse demanded more. The tragedy was far from over. Agamemnon's death was not the end but another chapter in the curse. Clytemnestra and Aegisthus ruled, but the blood they spilled demanded more. Agamemnon's children, Electra and Orestes, were left in danger. Orestes, exiled, grew up haunted by duty and vengeance. To avenge his father, he would have to kill his own mother. Guided by Apollo, Orestes returned, joined by Electra. Together, they killed Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, continuing the cycle. Orestes became a matricide, hunted by the Furies. The curse destroyed all it touched, each act of revenge birthing another. The tragedy of Agamemnon warns us, violence breeds only more violence. The choices of one generation echo through the next. The house of Atreus stands as a dark lesson in fate, family, and consequence. The story endures, a warning from the ancient world.